Welcome to the second presentation in the Corn College series. Today we'll be talking about the planting date study that we conducted in 2018 right here by the office south of Eckley. Just a little bit of background on the planting date study. It was conducted on a Haxton loamy sand, which is a relatively highly productive, one of the most highly productive sands that we have in the area. We chose three Pioneer hybrids: 339, 805, 1151. 339 was chosen as a hybrid that kind of has a characteristically above average emergence in cooler soils. 805 considered to be average emerger, and 1151 which would be considered to be below average emergence. So we wanted a hybrid in each category to kind of compare those differences in grain yield based on the emergence and planting dates. Planting dates, four different planting dates: April 26th, May 4th, May 14th, and May 25th. We initially tried to our target was April 15th planting date. Weather kept us out of the field until April 26th. We also collected soil temperature data from May 14th to May 28th, and we'll talk about this in the next slide. This graph is illustrating the 2-inch and 4-inch soil temperature at this planting date location. You'll notice that really after April 22nd, April 23rd, on average we stayed above that 50-degree Fahrenheit threshold. And this is very typical in what we see in the sand. Not much difference in the 2 to 4-inch depth. Thermal properties of a sand just make it it's easy to heat. There's not much buffering capacity. This is not what we would see in a heavier textured soil like a silt loam. You would see quite a bit of difference between that 2 and 4-inch depth just because of the buffering capacity in soil temperature. But as you can see, and that's what the trend lines are indicating, is just kind of that average soil temp. You can see in 2018 we stayed pretty consistent. We just stayed on an upward trend of warming up. That's unlike the previous years where we had a lot of ups and downs. We had snow in 2017 in early May, in 2 or 3 really cool days that caused that soil temp to dip down. Not a whole lot of ups and downs as far as average wise in 2018. When we look at grain yield of those three hybrids, there's a few things that stand out. The first being probably that April 25th, May 25th planting date for most of the hybrids was the highest yielding planting date. This is not something that we would usually see, especially with this late a planting date. However, I think if you look back and think about the end of the growing season, especially in September, we had cool period early in September, and then a really hot period for about the 2 middle weeks of September. And I think these yields are kind of a reflection of that in where those hybrids were at in their grain fill stages, and I think that's why this for 1151 anyways and 339 that's why those hybrids had a higher yielding with that later planting date, was just because of where it was when those end of season stresses occurred. Those plants were still pretty healthy and able to fill and handle that heat a lot better than the earlier planting dates. So when we look at individual hybrids, 339, which if you recall, is one that we consider above average emerger, and so really that first planting date and last planting date were the highest yielding. We did see a little bit of dip down in the May 4th and the May 14th planting dates. 805, very characteristic of what we would typically or normally think that we would see from a planting date study with these planting dates. Our May 4th planting date was almost 15 bushels higher than our April 26th planting date. So significant increase by waiting till May 4th to plant 805. And then we saw a gradual decrease after May 4th in the following two planting dates. 1151, if you fit a linear trend to those yields, we saw a steady increase the longer we waited to plant. Really no explanation or solid explanation for the dip down in the May 14th planting date. Probably had something to do with stresses during early grain fill is my looking at the weather data and where that was at during that early grain fill period. So not anything very surprising here when you consider the individual hybrids that we chose. In general, the later we waited to plant, the higher the yield, especially for that average emerger in 805 and that slightly below average in 1151. When we pull back the soil temperature data and overlay the planting dates on top of that, basically is what these rectangles are showing, or bars, is the 48-hour period after planting. And so you see in none of these planting dates do we have a very significant decrease in soil temperature those first 48 hours after planting. That April 26th one, we did get definitely our nighttime soil temps were below 50 degrees. However, on average, we were right at or above average or above 50 degrees. And you can see after the following three planting dates, really well above that 50 degree target for the most part. So. And like I said, 2018 was very different than 2016 and 17, where we saw a lot of fluctuation in soil temperatures. So just some general considerations to think about when selecting planting date. Don't start until that average soil temp is above 50 degrees and consistently above 50 degrees. In the sand, the soil temperature is reflected in the air temperature, and what I mean by that is that soil temperature follows the air temperature very closely in a sandy soil. Silt loam soil, it's a lot different. There's a lot more buffering capacity for temperature in a silt loam or a soil with higher clay or silt content. So just be looking at that and pay attention to that forecast, especially in the sand, because that is the soil temperature in the sand is reflective of what the air temperature is. So pay attention to that. The second thing is the planting, hybrid planting order. You could see the differences in yield between what characteristics of those hybrids, if they were a good emerger or they had the capability of emerging in cool soils. You can see the difference that had. And thinking back to the 805, planting April 26th versus May 5th, that was almost a 15 bushel increase in yield by waiting to May 5th. So. And I realize that we can't wait until early May to plant all of our acres because of logistics, but I think we do need to pay attention to what hybrids that we that we plant early. Pay attention in those ones that are better emerging or stronger emergence out of the ground. Plant them first, and then save the rest for later in the planting window. As you could see, it did make a big difference in yield. Just a couple bushels is worth it in my mind, as far as waiting for that ideal planting date, or what we think is better planting date, just because of the expected weather conditions. With that, we'll go ahead and conclude the second presentation of the Corn College 2019 Corn College. Our next presentation will highlight some of our tillage studies that we conducted last year in cooperation with CSU and Pioneer. Thank you.